We have incredible leadership all over the country and in international markets that dedicate their time to supporting you. You heard from some of them this morning on the stage. We have volunteers who serve on our ACCE board, our foundation board, our Fringe Benefits Incorporated board. There's a whole separate organization called the Benefits Trust that supports us. We've got our CCE Commission, countless task forces, advisory councils. Will you join me in thanking them for their support? They are really incredible, absolutely incredible. Just by a show of hands, for how many of you is this your first time at an ACCE convention? Wow. Well, welcome. We are glad to have you here. You chose wisely. This is a great place to get inspired, make new connections. This crowd is incredible. They will share with you their successes, but also the mistakes that they've made so that you don't have to make those same mistakes. So while you're here, I encourage you to introduce yourself to strangers, ask questions. There's just going to be a great opportunity to really connect, build your own network, and get some great ideas. So we are dealing with a time of absolute uncertainty right now. We're seeing challenges at the local, state, national, and global levels. There's all kinds of global uncertainty, economic uncertainty. I mean, the economy is performing in ways that we can't even predict. So this has been a really unusual time for us. Some of those old processes and outdated leadership models that we've been using, they just aren't cutting it. So what I'm going to share with you today is a framework that can help you be a more secure and solid chamber, but also help lead your chamber through the future. And I'm going to share examples of how chambers of commerce all over are reimagining the work that they're doing. So we don't just have to survive the uncertainty that we're dealing with, but we can actually find ways to boldly lead ourselves and others through this environment. So before I get into the ACCE content, I always like to start with this. If you've heard me speak before, you've heard me share this data. This is the Edelman Trust Barometer. This is a global public opinion poll. It looks at trust in major institutions. Those institutions are business, government, media, and NGOs or nonprofits. What I love about this data is that for the last 4 years, business has been the most trusted of all of those institutions. And I'm going to let that soak in with all of you for just a second. So in your community, you, as the platform and megaphone for business, and your members, the businesses in your community, you're the most trusted institutions locally. So this gives us an awful lot of momentum to accomplish really big things in our regions. But we're not just the most trusted entities, we're also considered the most competent of all of those major institutions, and we're considered incredibly ethical. In fact, only nonprofits or NGOs are considered slightly more ethical than businesses. So again, we have these incredible tailwinds behind us. So think about that as we're thinking about our roles within our markets. So at ACCE, we didn't just want to trust what business ideas are all about. We wanted to figure out what is public perception around chambers of commerce. So we partnered with the Harris Poll, one of the country's leading polling firms, and we wanted to look at public perception of chambers of commerce. The results were incredible. If you haven't spent any time looking at this data, really strong results. In fact, when the Harris team came and delivered the results to our board of directors, they said, "We do this for a living." These results are incredibly high. 81% of US adults believe that local chambers of commerce are a trusted resource and partner for business. Great, great numbers. But one thing that came out of the data was that awareness makes a huge impact on how people feel about our organizations. We know that people don't always understand what chambers do. They don't know our role within our communities. But when people are aware of their local chamber, their perception increases significantly. So 86% of US adults who are familiar with their local chamber are satisfied with what that chamber does. And that 86%, it doesn't even matter if they're members of their chamber or not. So we have to constantly be thinking about how can we increase awareness around who we are, what we do, but also sharing our successes. As chambers, we're really good at talking about what our members are doing, but not always great about talking about what we're doing within the community. So when we had this poll conducted, we didn't just want to look at perceptions of chambers, we also wanted to look at what happens when a business joins a chamber of commerce. So when you're looking at this chart, the green bar are responses from everyone who participated in the poll. The orange bar are responses from individuals who are familiar with their local chamber. So we asked, are you more or less likely to do the following? You're more likely to personally purchase goods or services from a business that's a member of a chamber. So all respondents, 50% of them, said yes, I'd be more likely to purchase goods or services. But when they're familiar with their local chamber, that jumps up by 14 points. 64% of folks familiar with their local chamber would be more likely to purchase goods or services from a business that's a chamber member. Then we asked, would you be more likely to recommend that business to someone else? Nearly half of all respondents said yes, but when they're familiar with their local chamber, that jumps up to 63%. And then what about pursuing a job or career at a business that's a chamber member? 39% of all respondents said I'd be more likely to pursue a job there, but when they're familiar with their chamber, that jumps to more than 50%. So this is some great data that a lot of chambers are using all across the country. If you haven't been playing around with the poll, you can use this QR code, save it on your phone. We've got infographics that you can share, lots of examples of how to leverage this data. People are putting this in their membership collateral, using it for sponsorship materials, sharing it on social media, also sharing it with media outlets and pairing that up with successes that your chamber's experiencing. Because this just reinforces the role that we play in our communities. So with that, I'm going to use this framework, the Horizon Initiative, to talk a little bit about the future. So when we sat down to conduct this research, we partnered with a leading futurist, Rebecca Ryan and David Brown and the rest of their team. We used foresight tools, and we had more than 1,000 chambers touch this research. So what this is are the major influences that are shaping the future of our profession. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the specific chamber examples of how they're adapting their work in order to better prepare for this future. So we've broken these influences into 3 different parts. The first are timeless influences. These are influences whose impact transcends time. So they've been around for a long time, these influences are present now, and they're going to be even more important into the future. So the first influence I'm going to talk about is political and social fragmentation. This is my favorite image in the entire slide deck. So this is happening all over the country, and this is not new. In fact, this concept is as old as time. It's what our political system is built on, the 2-party system. There's a natural push and pull. But what we're experiencing right now is there's a lot more othering that's taking place, especially with people who are on the other side of the political aisle from ourselves. That's creating a lot of challenges to us actually getting things done in the political and legislative arena. So why is this so important to us? This isn't going anywhere. In fact, I don't see the pendulum swinging in the other direction anytime soon. But our voices, as the business voices for our community, needs to be heard now more than ever. The issues that we're working on are very much middle-of-the-road, pragmatic, solutions-focused issues. We have to be present. There's an old saying in the government relations field that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And that's even more relevant right now. So we have to make sure that we're being heard in the process. This is a great example from the Springfield, Missouri Chamber. They refer to this as their voice of business. We're seeing a lot of chambers of commerce across the country doubling down on the work that they're doing at city council meetings, all local government meetings. So what they do is they have somewhere between 3 and 5 representatives from their chamber at every single city council meeting. So they're making sure they're not missing a beat on what's being covered, but also that their presence is known. They always know there are going to be multiple people in that room. In fact, they've delivered 10 presentations before City Council in 2025 alone. So you want to make sure everybody is aware your chamber is there and present. But some other things that we're doing with chambers of commerce across the country, we're seeing a lot of chambers forming coalitions in order to deliver on their government relations work. So this is the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance. A number of chambers in that market have come together so that they have a united policy platform for their region. Now, this doesn't mean that their local voice isn't still heard. They can definitely talk about what's critical in their local community, but this gives that, again, united feeling that all of the chambers are aligned. There's no confusion with policymakers. We've got a united front for our region. This last example, I think, is a really great one because it kind of gets at the root issue that a lot of us are facing. So this is a series of chambers in Colorado who got together and said, you know, we're not always having elected officials come into office who really understand how to grow a local economy. So instead of being reactive and dealing with the legislators that are coming into office, they said, how about we reimagine this problem? How do we get the right people elected? So they created a training program where they can go out into the community, find those pragmatic, solutions-focused individuals, and train them to run for office. So let's get right to the root cause and try to get people in office who are going to be a little bit more aligned with what it takes to grow the economy the right way. So I'm seeing chambers have really creative approaches to how to deal with this fragmented world that we're living in. Most importantly, we just have to make sure that we're there and we're engaging. So our next timeless influence is changing business models. We have a lot more competition for incredibly limited resources. So we've got to reimagine how we fund the work that we're doing. We track data on chambers of commerce. Membership as an overall percentage of revenue is flattening or declining for most chambers. Now, that's not the case in every single chamber out there, and there are a lot of factors that weigh in on how membership's going to perform in your organization. But if you're looking to grow as a chamber, you really need to be thinking about non-dues revenue and how can we grow in that area. In fact, from our dynamic chamber benchmarking, we found that for the average chamber, 38% of your revenue comes from membership dues and 62% comes from non-dues revenue. About a decade ago, those numbers were flipped. But again, we're seeing chambers really focusing on non-dues revenue for that growth opportunity. One of the best places to grow your non-dues revenue is through your 501c3 foundation. Little more than a decade ago, only about half, 51% of all chambers had a C3. Today, 75% of all chambers have a C3 foundation. This is my favorite slide in talking about the role that a foundation can play in your chamber. So that blue bar is the average revenue of a chamber that has a 501c3 foundation. The red bar, average revenue of a chamber that doesn't have a C3 foundation. So when you've got a foundation, you have about 2.2 times higher revenue than if you don't have a foundation. So again, this is a great way to try to drive some of that non-dues revenue. When we're talking about business models, we're also seeing a huge increase in mergers and partnerships. We've seen this mergers between chambers and chambers. We've seen it mergers between chambers and economic development organizations. In fact, that's a big trend. We're watching those two entities come back together. But we're not just seeing some of those traditional merger models where one chamber sort of swallows up another chamber. We're also seeing really creative partnerships out there. I love this example from the Greater Des Moines Partnership. They have a dual membership model. So when a business joins a local chamber, they also automatically become members of the Greater Des Moines Partnership as well. So there are 25 affiliated chambers that participate in this. It's grown the footprint, so they now are across 12 different counties. Again, this expands the benefits that members can have access to. But the outcomes are the best part. So this is now the third largest chamber in the United States based on membership numbers. They have a united voice because everybody is collaborating and working together. Those local chamber members get access to lots of great benefits. The local chamber provides incredible benefits, but now you also amplify that with the Greater Des Moines Partnerships membership. And you have less competition. People aren't competing for getting people in the door into their chambers because everyone's come together to collaborate. So these unusual and creative business models are really helping to drive a lot more change in communities. Thinking about your membership models, this is the Fox Cities Chamber from Wisconsin. This is one of our Chamber of the Year winners from last year. They've been reimagining their membership model. Now, if you've heard us talking about new membership models, you've probably heard us talking about something called freemium membership. This is where you can offer a free membership to some small subset of members within your chamber. Fox Cities has tried this. It's called their Connect Free membership. If you run into Becky Bartosik, who runs that chamber, she's here. She'd be happy to talk to you about that. So that's one creative membership model. But they've also created a dues category for remote workers, because they recognized there are people within their community that work for companies that might not be headquartered locally, but they want those individuals engaged in the chamber. So they're expanding the scope of who is under the tent of membership for their chamber. So think about that within your own community. Are there segments of the community that haven't been engaged, and other ways that you can bring them into the mix? So in thinking about business models, this is US Census Bureau data for applications to start new businesses. So you can see since the pandemic, there's been a huge spike in these new businesses. So within your chamber, if there's someone who's starting a business, an entrepreneur, do they feel like the chamber is the place to go to get resources and support that work? We're seeing chambers really creatively think about how can we support those entrepreneurs. Now, there may be other organizations in your community that provide that support, but there's probably some segment of the entrepreneurial journey that could use additional support. I love this example from the Greensboro, North Carolina Chamber. They've got something for pretty much every stage of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. They've got incubators, programs to help scale, they have accelerators, and then ongoing training as well. These entrepreneurial organizations and startups at some point are going to be your mid-sized and larger employers. You want to make sure they know that the chamber is the go-to place from the get-go. All right, so our next influence is changing expectation. There has been lots of change in expectation about how chambers of commerce are supposed to engage. What are the issues we're supposed to engage on? But there's also changing expectation from our members about how they want to be served. So going back to that Harris poll, we asked some questions getting at sort of the role of chambers. The first 3 questions that we asked are a lot more about that traditional chamber function. So we asked, do US adults feel like the local chamber has some sort of a role in these various aspects? 92% of US adults believe that local chambers create a network for business owners. 91% believe that chambers grow business locally. And 9 out of 10 US adults believe that chambers grow the local economy. Great numbers. But this last question really gets at changing expectations, because chambers are expected to engage on these community impact issues. 88% of US adults think that local chambers address challenges within their community. So chambers are engaging on these issues and topics that historically we haven't engaged in before. So this is the Salt Lake Chamber. Their foundation has a few key priorities. They're focused on economic mobility, creating family-friendly workplaces, and mental health, because these are the types of challenges that really affect our workforce, and they in fact affect our employers. So they've created resources that address these topics. They've got a resource guide that talks about the role that childcare plays in their local economy and the impacts that it has. They've also created a resource guide on how to create a family-friendly workplace. And then they've got 2 toolkits for employers, one on suicide prevention and one on workforce resilience through mental fitness. So they're seeing these big community impact issues and creating resources to address them. Now, the Pearland Chamber in Texas, one of our Chamber of the Year folks from last year, they decided that their #1 issue for the Texas legislature this year was going to be mental health. So they ended up doing a needs assessment so they could have data to provide to policymakers to showcase exactly what kind of impact this issue has locally. They also created flyers that they put up in local businesses. There's a QR code that you can scan that leads you to resources and programs that are available locally. But then they took that one step further, and their advocacy around this issue has driven real change. In fact, they were able to secure $5 million for mental health crisis services in their community. So again, these big issues that you didn't see chambers engaging in before, they're engaging in now. But just because we're working on community impact issues, that doesn't mean that we're not still serving our businesses. But we have to think a little bit differently about how we do that kind of service. So this is the Chautauqua Chamber in New York. They recognize that their small businesses locally, sometimes it's really difficult to get to a program that's being run from 9 to 5. They've got their own business that they have to engage in. And if you're offering an after-hours program, well, now you're asking people to step away from their family time in order to conduct these trainings or participate. So they've partnered with their local SBDC, so they didn't even do this alone, and they've got online, on-demand training in some of the key areas that those small businesses need help with, whether it's social media marketing, copyrights, patents, and they can conduct these trainings and get online micro-certification in these areas. So you're offering good information, and they can access it at a time that's more convenient for them. So our next influence in the timeless category is inclusive economic growth. This is talking about, are you engaging all of the businesses in your community or just some of them? Are you activating all of the stakeholders when you're trying to gather information, or are you relying on the same voices that historically you've always relied on? In fact, from our Harris Poll study, something that came out of the data was that women and women business owners have much lower awareness of what a chamber does and much lower engagement in chambers of commerce. So within your own community, are there opportunities for you to try to bring those individuals into the mix if historically they haven't been involved before? So I'm seeing chambers take lots of creative approaches to dealing with this. The Bronx Chamber of Commerce, they have a great Adopt a Member program. So they recognize that a lot of smaller businesses just can't afford to get the resources that they so desperately need. So they allow for other chambers to adopt them and bring them into the membership. But I also love examples where chambers are coming together and providing some guidance and resources within their region. So there are 3 chambers in Georgia: the Clayton Chamber, the Atlanta Airport Chamber, and the Fayette Chamber. They all banded together to build the Inclusive Economics Summit. So this is where they're helping have their entire communities think about, how can we approach this in a different way? They're tackling issues like making sure our supply chain is the strongest that it can be within our state. So thinking about this idea of inclusive economic growth, at ACCE we've been spending a lot of time talking about economic mobility. And over the past couple of years, we've done a lot thinking about economic mobility in communities that have struggled with this more than others. A lot of rural communities have a hard time with this. So we've brought together a cohort of chamber professionals from all across the country. They were able to learn from each other as well as experts in the field, and there were some incredible outcomes from that work. We have a great resource guide, some good case studies that are available. If you're in a rural community, I highly recommend checking out these findings. Also, if you know of a chamber that's in your state that is in a rural market, there's some great resources available here. You can even pick up some tools if you're not in a rural community about how to reimagine economic mobility. So really good information there for you to look into later. So our next influence is digital transformation. Everybody's been talking about AI for quite some time, but this isn't just about AI. It's also about making sure you're leveraging tools like your CRM to its highest capacity. But when it comes to AI, I've seen chambers doing really creative things in this area. How many of you are using AI regularly in your roles right now, by show of hands? All right, good number of folks doing it. If you haven't tried it, it's a game changer. I highly recommend checking it out. But places that I've seen chambers leveraging this, Everything from scheduling, getting things on the calendar, writing and editing, design work. I've seen chambers using this for forecasting, for your financials, going through resumes when you post a job opening. There are just countless places that you can leverage this to make your jobs more effective and efficient. But some of the best feedback that I've gotten about how to treat the content that you get from AI is to treat it like it's coming from a very young, very green, very inexperienced intern. So you want to make sure you double check it, fact check it. There are some great AI platforms out there where they cite sources. So Perplexity, Claude, they will actually send you the sources so you can make sure you check it. But this is a great tool for us, but also for our members. We want to make sure we're preparing our members for how they can best use these tools to help with their job and reimagining what their workforce is going to look like in the future. But when we're thinking about digital transformation, I actually like to think about it one step further. Our news, when we go back to that Harris, from the Edelman Trust Barometer, media is losing trust across the country. People are getting their news and their information from very fragmented sources. You don't just go to the same 2 or 3 sources to get your news anymore. And news is happening online. So if you think about chambers and the role that we play as these sort of trusted outlets, I get really excited at the opportunity for chambers to step in and serve as their own media outlets. And we're starting to see this happen all across the country. So this is a great example from the Northern Kentucky Chamber. They created something called Link. This is an online news outlet that highlights business news, but also key things that are happening in their community. So again, it's taking advantage of that trusted role that we already play and bringing lots of information into one place so everyone can go to see it. What can really happen here that's exciting is that other media outlets will then reference your page and share your information more broadly. So it's a chance to expand your own brand, expand your reach, and again, leverage that trusted role that you play. So if we're talking about media, we can't ignore the role that influencers play in the media world. I get really excited when I see chambers taking advantage of these influencers and leveraging them for their own work. So the Conroe Lake Conroe Chamber, they hosted an influencer day. They brought in local influencers, those who are kind of particularly focused in areas of food and beverage, and they were able to highlight some of their local businesses who are in this area to expand the brand of the chamber, to get more people engaged, and to showcase some of those local businesses and what they're doing. I think this is absolutely brilliant, and they did this the right way. They made the event very sort of exclusive. It's got a red carpet. They have Instagrammable moments there. When you walk in, there's a gift box at the front when you check in. So Instagram, everyone's taking the photos, they're posting it. The influencers feel special, but again, it's expanding the reach of the message to audiences that historically they may not have been engaged with before. And some chambers are even thinking about how do we create our own influencers. So this is the Greater Scranton Chamber. They completely reimagined their ambassador program. And they said, how about if we create our own influencers? So this made them rethink who are the people that we want to be the influencers talking about the chamber, what kinds of messages are they going to deliver, gives those influencers more autonomy and how they're going to share those messages, but it's just rethinking it in a way that they're, again, creating their own influencers, and it's a totally different model for sharing what the chamber does. Really creative ways to think about it. All right, so now we're on to our timely influences. These are the things that are particularly relevant right now. This one is something I think everybody in this room is working on. It's talent development at the speed of business, and that speed has only increased. When we talk about talent development, it's a huge spectrum of engagement, but one of the things that we've seen a lot of activity around is skills. The speed of skills change is incredibly rapid. The average job has seen 32% of its essential skills change over the last 3 years. And for some positions, that can go all the way up to 75% of their essential skills shifting in the last few years. So upskilling and reskilling is a huge part of our workforce and talent plans. So at the Opelika Chamber, this is one of our Chamber of the Year winners last year, they've created a great program, hotel operations. So their hotel businesses are expanding and they really needed help with talent. So they have a free training program that gets people skilled up in the essential skills needed for those roles. You receive a credential after you do this skills-based training. That credential can also be applied for credits at the local community college, and people are skilled right away and available to step into those roles. So they're thinking about the greatest needs in their communities and filling them. Some other great workforce and talent things I've seen across the country, this is the Washington Workforce Portal. You can check it out online. It's really easy to use. So students, if they're looking for internships or apprenticeships, they can go and look for roles in different markets. Employers can go get matched up with students, but also educators can get matched up with those employers to make sure that they're aligning their curriculum and the things they're teaching in schools with the needs of the business community. This is a great partnership between the state chamber and a number of local and regional chambers in Washington state. For talent attraction, I'm seeing some very creative approaches here. Commerce Lexington has done a great job of highlighting what are some of the best assets of their community when they're trying to pull talent from other markets. And they make it really easy. They've got a cost of living calculator, a jobs board, and then they also talk about their differentiators. So they have a great ability to have housing there. They have affordable housing, which is something that's really rare. So I love that model. The Wilmington Chamber has done something very similar. They have something called Career Coast North Carolina. They've got a great cost of living calculator and a jobs board. But what they did that I think is brilliant is there's a lot of misconception. You know, if you're living on a coastal community, you think, okay, travel and tourism, that's the #1 industry. They take a point to highlight the industries that are available so that people realize, oh, there's a lot more to offer here than I thought. So they talk about fintech and healthcare and engineering jobs. So this opens up people's eyes to the fact that there may be some career options that they weren't aware of in that market. One thing that we're hearing in lots of different communities is that younger workers coming into the workforce aren't necessarily skilled up in soft skills, which I refer to as essential skills. These are things like conflict management, time management, decision-making, problem solving. And so you heard a little bit about it this morning, that we have partnered with Pravi to try to offer training for your members in soft skills. And this is a place where you can get non-dues revenue as well. If you're interested in hearing more about the program, you can click on this QR code and you'll sign up to hear more. We're in the sort of the testing and piloting phase right now, but we'll be launching that soon, and we'd love to help you out in that area. All right, this next timely influence is one that I get really excited about. So earlier on, we talked about political and social fragmentation. There's actually an opportunity for us as chambers to make a difference in this area. And it's the idea that chambers can be unifiers. And when I say unifiers, I don't mean that we get everybody to agree on political issues, because that's not going to happen. But there are ways where we can have disagreement on what policy outcomes need to happen, but we still have unity within our communities. So this is back to the Edelman Trust Barometer. In this year's data, they realized that their respondents seem to have a lot of grievance across the board. People have grievance in general. So they rated some of the responses based on level of grievance. But they asked, in order to ensure a better future, is business obligated to nurture a workplace that has civility? 80% of people across the board said yes, that business should be nurturing more civility within the workplace. And so this is a role that chambers can really play. And I'm seeing chambers embrace this all across the country. In the Tampa Bay Chamber, they're hosting programs about bipartisanship, how important it is to work across the aisle to make sure that you're talking to people from other political parties. At the Greater Des Moines Partnership, they're hosting webinars on how do you create a civility action plan, whether it's for your business or for your community. And then I'm also seeing chamber leaders stepping out and talking about this in big, bold ways. So the CEO of the Greater Arvada Chamber, Cami Welch, she posted a great article about hey, I learned from middle schoolers that it's really important to have civility. So think about the places where you can talk about this within your community to try to drive that change. We can disagree, but how can we disagree better? And again, I feel that chambers have the opportunity to make a huge difference in bringing people together instead of allowing people to continue to feel like they're pulled apart. So our next timely influence is leadership churn. We are seeing this all over the country, in chambers, in business organizations, but with other stakeholders in our community. People at the top are leaving. This is a public company CEO turnover index. If you look since the pandemic, huge spike in turnover. So what does this mean for us as chambers? Well, one, we need to be helping our members with succession planning, because that's an essential necessity across the board. But we also have to be thinking about that next generation of leaders. How do we cultivate the next generation to make sure they're prepared to lead? So many of you have YP programs for young professionals out there. We're watching chambers reimagine how they run their YP programs. So it's not just about networking or skill building. How do we give them the skills for what it takes to really lead in the future? So this is the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. They partnered with their local university, and they're training on the key skills that are essential for the future. It's things like leading with emotional intelligence, communication, influence, decision-making, how to lead for change. So think about the skills that are essential in your community. How can you train your YP professionals in those areas? I love this example from the Hawaii Chamber. So they have a young professionals program. One of the big challenges that they face in their community is cost of living. It's a beautiful place to live. It's very expensive. So they pulled together this summit, had their YP professionals talk about what kinds of solutions they can come up with to solve for this challenge. But they didn't just stop there. They also had those young professionals take that information to the decision makers and policymakers and advocate for that change. What's brilliant about this is they showed the chamber is the place that brings everyone together, but they empowered them to come up with solutions and taught them how to actually go and try to affect change with decision makers in their market. Brilliant way to just get them much more involved. And this is another great example from the Frisco Chamber in Texas. So they actually have a YP program, but they have a separate program. It's the Young Entrepreneurs Academy. So they're getting students at an even younger age and trying to train up for how can you build that idea of an entrepreneurial mindset, and again, teaching really young students that the Chamber of Commerce is the place that you should go if you're interested in starting a business. Next timely influence, global impacts. Obviously, we're seeing lots of things happening on the global stage that impact us locally. Oftentimes, our role is sharing good information. We are that trusted source. So lots of chambers are hosting webinars and programs explaining what tariffs might mean for your market, what it might mean for your local industry. So it's sharing that trusted detail and information. But there are other chambers that take it a step further. I love this example from the DC Chamber. They've got a program called Export DC. This really helps their local businesses find those international markets where they can invest and increase their sales. So it's growing their own market beyond our own borders. All right, this is our final category. These are the linchpin issues. These are the influences that are cornerstones of what chambers do and will continue to be so in the future. There are only two of these influences. The first is belonging and gathering. This is sort of the heart of what we do as chambers. This has completely changed. Historically, people would join their chamber because their grandfather joined their chamber. That's not how it works anymore. We really have to focus on value proposition. We also used to have a lot of top-down power models where chambers would tell their members what they're going to do. The next generation really wants power models that are bottom-up. They want to be a part of the decision-making process. They want to be a part of strategic planning. So people are craving these in real-life experiences. But that means our events, they have to be a little bit more special than they used to be. Can't just be about networking. We have to provide clear value, show that we're solving the problems that our members are facing. They also want special experiences, things that they can't get anywhere else, information they can't find in other places, connections that they can't make at other locations, and just feel like they're doing something special when they get together. So we have to rethink our events in those kinds of terms. But I'm also loving how I'm seeing chambers reimagine their office spaces to create more of a sense of community and bring people together. So this is the Lubbock Chamber. They reimagine their space and they call it the Co-Lab. So they've got beautiful co-working space, places where people can gather, brainstorm, share ideas. Again, just rethinking how you use the space around you. So our last influence is catalytic leadership. This is where you're the catalysts for change. It's about going from transactional to transformational, going from reactive to proactive. It's where you're actually charting your own future. I love this example. This is from the Detroit Regional Chamber. They said, we're going to create an innovation corridor between Detroit and Ann Arbor. We're going to leverage the resources that we have, take advantage of our educational institutions, build the research, the policy, to make sure that this is a place that attracts businesses that want to innovate and attracts talent that wants to be a part of that. So they're creating their future through this innovation effort. Then other chambers are doing this through creating the vision for their region. So a great example from the Utah Valley, a number of local chambers, the university, and other stakeholders came together to say, what do we want to be in 2050 so that we can better prepare for that future? Their vision included water management, transportation, clean air, education, housing, local agriculture, and recreation. So again, they're saying, what is our future going to be? And making sure everybody figures out what their lane is so that they know how to get from point A to point B. So you all in this room have the chance to be futurists for your own communities. In fact, there's nobody better suited to do it than you, to chart where are we going, how do we need to get there, and we've seen some chambers doing that already. In Bend, Oregon, they used the same tools that we used for the Horizon Initiative to craft a report for their community. Where are we headed? How do we need to get there? So if you haven't spent time with the Horizon Initiative, we've got lots of great resources online. We have examples from chambers all over the country. We have a small business and small chamber implementation guide. We've got videos, information you can share with your board. If you don't know where to start, a great place is to figure out with your board, what are the priorities that are most influential in your community? Which of these influences are going to mean the most for you locally? And a lot of chambers are using this to help build their own strategic plans. I have to say a huge thank you to our Horizon investors. These are the biggest investors in our association. They help drive this research. If you're a Horizon investor, you get free attendance at some of our programming, special events. If you have any interest in hearing more about Horizon Investment, you can find Ryan Keaty on my staff. He'd be happy to share more with you. So we have these unpredictable times. And in unpredictable times, people are seeking strong, steady leadership. They want that calm at the center of the storm. But our leadership needs to change. It needs to be adaptable, innovative, collaborative, and much more forward-leaning. We're developing a lot of resources to help you lead through this uncertainty. This is our Leading Through Uncertainty playbook. If you haven't seen it, it's free for members. If you click on that QR code, it'll take you straight to it. This is a great resource for communications, government relations, but also how to communicate through some of these polarized environments that we operate in right now. Definitely consider checking that out. So when we're thinking about leadership, this is one of the best books that I have read on chamber leadership. Actually, not just chamber leadership, but leadership in general. It was written by Dave Atchison, who is the CEO of the Kentucky Chamber. Is Dave in the room by any chance? Hi, Dave. So Dave has made the audiobook for this book free for all of you for attending this convention. If you click on that QR code, you can get access to this. Thank you, Dave, for doing that. Again, this is an incredible read. This gets right at the leadership skills that we need during times like this. So highly recommend checking that out. So the work that we do is really challenging, and I know that. I actually wrote my last Chamber Executive article on the fact that our mental health is a business asset, and we need to keep that in mind. It's really important to focus on that. And sometimes when things get difficult, it's important to get back to your why. So this is a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. You want to get back to the place, what's your passion? What's the drive? Why are you doing all of this? I love this job because you all have such incredible impacts in your community, and the small role that we get to play in supporting you means a lot. But I care so much about what chambers and businesses can do to create a bigger future and a brighter future because I care a lot about that future. The reason I care so much about that future is because this is my why. This is my 17-year-old son who is here today for his first convention. So this is the most nervous I have ever been speaking because he's here. But I think about the future that we are leaving him. And that's why I work so hard to do the things that we do and support you, because I want that future to be stronger for him. So when things get difficult, think about your own why. And oftentimes that's going to be people. It might be people in your life that you're building a future for. It might be your team. It might be your business members. It might be the stakeholders in your community. But getting back to that why, it can be the catalyst for your own leadership, help with your own engagement, and it centers you in your decision making. And I have one more why before I close out. I am inspired all the time by our ACCE team. It takes every single member of our staff to put on a program like this, but also to support year-round the work that you do. They are passionate. They care so much about you. Will you please join me in thanking my team for everything that they do? And if you haven't met them, you'll see a little button that says ACCE staff. They would love to connect with you. They would love to hear more about what you're doing and be of support. So during uncertain times, people, again, are looking for that steady leadership. They want to feel like they've got access to support. They want solutions and not rhetoric. They don't want to hear more noise. They want clarity. And that's exactly what chambers of commerce do. That's our role. So during these times of uncertainty, it's not the time to retreat or to settle back. This is the time for us to double down on relationships, double down on solutions, double down on leadership, because the future isn't going to wait for us to feel ready. The future needs us right now. So while you're here thinking about those big challenges within your organization, the big challenges for your businesses, use this time to get inspired, find others who've dealt with these problems before. This is a great place to learn. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this week. If you haven't met me before, please come up and introduce yourself. I would love to meet you. With that, enjoy the program. All of the sessions start right about now. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Everybody at the bar get tips. I've been boozy since I left. I ain't changing for a check. Tell my mom I ain't forget. Woke up drunk at 10 a.m. We gon' do this shit again. Tell your girl to bring a friend.